Yo, what's up guys? In today's video, I'll be talking about Usman Nurmagomedov and what's been going on with him recently. So let's get right into it. So Usman just fought recently on July 31st against Archie Kogan. But the day before the fight, Jake Paul announced that his MVP promotion will be buying out PFL. And there's a long track history of Jake Paul heavily criticizing the UFC and Dana White about fighter pay and how their fighters don't get paid enough. So leading up into that Usman fight, he ends up winning by knockout in the first round. And in the post-fight interview, Usman asked Jake Paul for a bonus for the first round finish that he just got. And Jake Paul replied with that if he gets a knockout in his next fight, he will buy him a car. Which is a crazy thing to say. Like, why would he say a car? Just because Usman is the biggest fighter on that PFL roster. And that led with Usman to reply with, "We don't know what will happen tomorrow, so let's talk about today." And things just get awkward after that. I can't lie. And then at one point during the interview, Usman basically just says that that's his last fight on his PFL contract. And if you look at Jake Paul's reaction, it's ridiculous. It's almost like he didn't even know that was his last fight on his contract. But the very next day, it was UFC Serbia, and in the post-fight press conference, they asked Dana White if he's interested in signing Usman to the UFC, and which he replied with just by saying sure, but he had a big ass smile on his face. There was even a tweet that Dana White replied to talking about that whole Usman thing, about him possibly going to the UFC, and Dana just replies with a big smiley face emoji. It was only a matter of time Usman was gonna go to the UFC, but after I saw the interviews with Usman and Dana White, I started to think about who could he possibly face in the UFC for his debut. But before I name those fighters, I do want to talk about the fighters that do come over from the PFL or Bellator. Not a lot of them have success in the UFC. There could be a chance where Usman could be one of those fighters as well. We've seen countless of fighters that get overhyped just to end up struggling in the UFC. I think that him being related to Khabib plays a big factor in this, because they supposedly have the best fighters in the world. They have Umar being 20-1, and his only loss was against Merab for that title shot. But also they have Islam Makhachev, who has a chance to break Anderson Silva's UFC winning streak this upcoming Saturday against Ian Gary. And of course, the new fighter that they just added to the UFC, John Pork, also known as Shanko. And of course, the one and only, the Eagle, Khabib. So whenever a fighter is associated with Khabib, they're just held highly. And I'm actually interested on what the UFC plans to do with Usman if he was to join the UFC. I was watching the recent Pound for Pound podcast with Kamaru Usman and Henry Cejudo, and they had Ali as their guest for that episode. And Ali ends up mentioning how if Usman was to go to the UFC, that the first fight he would want is for him to go up against Ilia Topuria. And then he goes on and rambles on how Usman would defeat every fighter in the lightweight division, and how the only challenge would be against Arman Tsarukyan. I understand that that's his fighter and he manages him, but what the fuck is he saying? Look, we've seen multiple times fighters that come from PFL and Bellator, like I said, don't have really any success in the UFC. You have fighters like Aaron Pico, who got knocked out by Lerone Murphy, Patchy Mix, who got cooked by Mario Batista, Michael Chandler, who never really beat the top guys in the lightweight division. He just had entertaining fights. And those are just a few fighters. But again, the only thing that is different about Usman compared to the other fighters is that he's related to Khabib. That's literally it. I might sound crazy, but Khabib's teams are known to be the best, and a lot of people say they're unstoppable. So I'm really curious of how high the UFC holds Usman expectations. Like, would they instantly give him a fighter like Patty, or a fighter like Ilia Topuria, or even the champion Justin Gaethje? Although all those matchups sound crazy, I'm just really curious on how they will go about it. Because I mean, when you look at his resume and what team he's on, I wouldn't be surprised if they give him a fighter like Charles or Max Holloway. But Ali's asking for Ilia Topuria for his UFC debut. But I ain't gonna lie, I might get a lot of hate for this, but a lot of these Dagestanis got that Dana White privilege. So we would have to wait and see what they do with Usman. But with Usman coming to the UFC, I won't lie, it will definitely shake the lightweight division up if he was to win in his debut. But I'm gonna name a couple fighters that make sense for Usman, in my opinion. And at the end of the video, I'll kind of explain what I think the UFC is realistically going to do. So let's get right into it. So the first fighter that I have in mind is the up-and-coming lightweight who's been making a lot of noise with his submission win against Gamrot, and that's number 6 ranked Quillen Salkild. I think if the UFC really wants to see how good Usman is in the UFC, I think that's the perfect matchup for his first fight, just because Quillen Salkild is 6-0 in the UFC, with 5 of those wins being by finish. And not only that, like I said, he's coming off an impressive win against Gamrot by submission in round 1. Like, that's literally impressive. And with a matchup like this, just makes more sense, because I do believe Ilia, Arman, and Charles all need to fight for that belt before Usman even gets a chance at it. So with a couple of guys already being in line for the title shot, I think the number 6 ranked Quillen Salkild is the perfect matchup for the ranking situation, but also to see if Usman can hang with the top 5 fighters in the lightweight division, of course. But another fighter that I like that he just announced that he's moving up to lightweight is Diego Lopez. He just posted on Instagram with a photo with Hunter, and the caption said something about him being a lightweight. I think the hashtag was 155. So basically it's confirmed he's moving up. And I've talked about it in multiple videos of mine. I don't think it would be a bad idea to have Diego Lopez debut at lightweight against Usman, because Diego is ranked number 2 in the featherweight division, and he fights anyone. It doesn't matter to him. So this is a possible fight that could honestly happen. He said that he'll be ready by November, and it wouldn't be a bad one as well. But another option, it could be Paddy Pimblett. I truly do think that Paddy's one more win away to get that title shot for his next fight. But the thing is, Paddy would have a lot to risk in a fight like this if he was to take it against Usman. That's why a part of me thinks that he won't accept a fight like this unless the UFC literally tells him like that he's next for the belt. But this matchup would be really good just because Paddy's coming off an impressive flawless victory against Benoit Saint Denis, and his grappling versus Usman's grappling would be fun to see. But the realistic option that I could see the UFC doing is Charles Oliveira, just because originally he was rumored to fight Arman Tsarukyan on UFC 331, and the winner would get a chance at the belt. So a lot was on the line, but since Charles pulled out of the fight because of his friend that passed away recently, this opens an opportunity for Usman. And if the UFC holds him highly, they could give him that fight just because he is 22-0 at the PFL with I think like 7 title defenses. So that still means something. And since Arman's already booked to fight Rufi, I think this makes it an easy matchup to make. I would mention Max Holloway possibly facing Usman, but I think that he's going to wait it out so he could fight Conor McGregor again, just like Michael Chandler did, and wait for many months. Although I really hope Max Holloway doesn't do that, but out of all the names that I mentioned, I really hope Usman ends up going against Quillen Salkild or even Diego Lopez. But I think that the realistic option, what the UFC plans to do, is give Usman Charles Oliveira, just because the fight between Charles and Arman didn't go through for September. I could definitely see them making this fight between Charles and Usman around October or even November. I think that it will give both of the guys some time to not only train, but also with Charles Oliveira to recover through what he's going through right now and try to get his mind set. But it gets tricky since the BMF is Charles Oliveira. I do wonder how they're going to go about that, because I'm not sure if the fight against Arman was going to be for the BMF. And at that point, it's just a tricky situation, because that would mean every fight after Charles Oliveira would damn near be a title fight for a BMF belt and the championship belt. And I don't think the UFC wants to do that. So I think if they have him vacate somehow, or I don't know, it's going to be tricky, especially since they might line him up against Usman or even Arman again. But these are just ideas. I could be completely wrong about these matchups. But now all we could do is just wait till the UFC announces something for Usman. And a part of me thinks that they will announce his debut or announce that he got signed to the UFC during UFC 330 on that Islam Makhachev versus Ian Gary card. I could definitely see them doing that, kind of like what they did for Gable Stevenson. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'm trying to upload a little bit more often, but make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.